Degrassi. What's that? If you weren't born in the 90s or you aren't Canadian, you probably missed out on the cultural phenomenon that is Degrassi. My story with Degrassi begins in 8th grade, the year of my gay awakening, more or less. As a young closeted child, I was in search of representation. I googled lesbian movies and shows with gay characters in secret. Name a movie with lesbians and I've probably seen it. Anything before 2015 at least. The problem is that the media is littered with garbage. Tired of what I had seen, I searched for something more original, more inspired, more Canadian. I stumbled across Degrassi, Next Class. But the name sounded familiar. One Google search later, and I realized the well I'd dug myself into. Degrassi spans decades of runtime, beginning in 1979 with The Kids of Degrassi Street. The show later adapted into Degrassi Junior High as the kid actors from that show aged. Later, the show became Degrassi High and ran until 1991. The show did not see a network return for another decade, when in 2001 it came back with a complete redesign. The show is now called Degrassi: The Next Generation. And this is the show most people think of when they hear the word Degrassi. Yes, this is the version with Aubrey Graham, known more commonly as Drake.
Don't pull up at 6 a.m. Anything you guys want.
And finally, after The Next Generation came The Next Class, that show I'd found earlier. I'd come full circle in my research. So now, the question was, do I just watch the 3-season Next Class, or do I start from the beginning? I did the math. 1 summer break, 1 laptop, 22 seasons. Challenge accepted. Let's start by taking a look at Degrassi's origins. If you think Degrassi only began talking about the hard-hitting issues in its revamps, think again. The very first episode of Degrassi Junior High raises quite the conversation about female sexuality. Remember, this is 1987, and the actors, they're all playing their actual ages. Think 13 and 14-year-olds. The plot is simple. An 8th grader is running for class president. But she's a girl. Naturally, the boys don't take her seriously. What does she do? She gives in. She uses her sexuality to her advantage. She's gained all the boys' votes. But her friend, who is helping her run, feels uneasy about it. She wanted Steph to win based on her ideas, not her body. The boys pressure her into exploiting her body, but it gets to a point where she is visibly uncomfortable. The beauty of this show is that it doesn't give easy answers. In the end, she wins the election. Is Steph wrong for using her body to do so? Her friend's upset because she feels abandoned, but she's not necessarily upset because of what Steph did while abandoning her. The episode ends with Steph planning a speech to present to the PTA. That's it. Kate Taylor, then Associate Director, said of Degrassi, "We are not going to wrap things up neatly. We really strive to show the complexity and shades of gray. I think that distinguishes it from a lot of other shows kids have watched over the years. It's not your typical, very special episode where a moral issue is presented and the characters struggle to find an answer but eventually reach a consensus. Another element that makes Degrassi unique is that it's targeted directly towards children. The camera work all depicts scenes from the viewpoint of a child, so when you watch Degrassi Junior High, you are literally seeing through a middle schooler's eyes. Degrassi Junior High was, and still is, considered one of the most groundbreaking children's shows on television. This show was so influential that episodes aired in classrooms all around the US for human development courses. Public broadcasting rules. Degrassi Junior High includes plotlines such as interracial relationships, questioning one's sexuality, and the big one, teen pregnancy. Yes, this is Degrassi Junior High. You can only imagine what will happen when the kids get to high school. But you don't have to imagine. After much critical acclaim, a new series was produced titled Degrassi High. Here's the thing. Degrassi goes there.
Show goes there.
It's their whole platform. I mean, they made a whole TV special to reflect just how much they go there. They're willing to speak about issues teens care about, while other production companies are too scared to do the same on a children's/teen show. In the late 80s, while the US was still reeling with the AIDS epidemic, Degrassi High decided to give one of its characters a storyline that dealt with the issue. Did they give the storyline to the gay kid? No. They gave it to the straight cis male, the bully. The Degrassi world is so complex, it allows its characters to be multidimensional, something that creates empathy and understanding for complex social issues. In this episode, the character Dwayne goes on an entire learning journey as he debunks his preconceptions about HIV, AIDS, and gay people.
Yeah, it's scary for homos and druggies and those
Hemophiliacs, Dwayne.
them too. But not for us.
The subplot is that the school is promoting sexual education and has recently installed condom machines in the bathroom.
Now, you take your money, insert it here, turn the knob, and you get a condom here.
I wonder if a certain school that rhymes with Lent would ever do that. Though, he does so in isolation. He's mocked for wanting to learn about HIV and isolated by his friends. Despite his reputation, there is empathy to be had. This kind of media representation is essential for feminism because, as we know, feminism isn't solely about uplifting women. It is equality of genders. Combating stereotypes about the LGBT community changes people's views on the issue of gender that is inherently related to homophobia. Femininity is often depicted as lesser than and weaker, and the stereotypically flamboyant gay man people think of is feminine. How could a man be attracted to a man? That's something reserved for women. To be perceived as feminine, as a man, is the worst thing one can be. But Degrassi shows us that's not true. Honestly, it's hard to find much fault with these two series. The switch to network television is where things go a little bit more haywire. At the end of Degrassi High's 2-season run, the original creator of Degrassi said herself she believed it was its closing time. There had been rumors of a network pickup, but she believed it best served its purpose on public television. If it were a network show, it would no longer be Degrassi. Perhaps inspired by Degrassi, but not the same. With this context in mind, I'll now talk about the 14-season-long teen drama that is Degrassi: The Next Generation. I have to address the elephant in the room. Degrassi: The Next Generation is racist. Some might come at me for using such a strong word, but it's true. Now, Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High had some pretty amazing storylines involving racism and promoting racial inclusivity, giving main characters of color an equal share of storylines as their white counterparts. However, the Next Gen reboot tries to follow in the same footsteps, but falls flat. Let's start by talking about Hazel Auden. She's introduced in Season 1 as a minor background character, friend to the mean girl. The black girl being a bitchy mean girl? Now, why does that sound familiar? Does the media like to cast women of color as bitchy characters?
If you weren't rich, I'd totally dump you. Keep your paws off my man.
Anyway, in Season 2, Hazel gets an episode dedicated to her where we learn more about her character. Now, this episode has a lot going on. In short, Hazel is pretending to be Jamaican when she's actually Muslim. She pretends to be Jamaican out of fear of Islamophobia and being isolated. The thing is, Hazel herself is pretty Islamophobic.
You guys want a real fashion crime? Do you think there may be bald under there?
Do you think maybe you're just a bit ignorant?
You're under arrest. Crime, terrorist chic.
Now, this episode isn't awful. Degrassi actually brings up some fairly interesting topics about internalized racism and internalizing other stereotypes, but it's never followed through with again. She magically accepts her culture in 20 minutes.
My name is Hazel Aden, and I was born in Mogadishu, Somalia, not Jamaica. And yes, I'm a Muslim.
And no other episode ever talks about Hazel to this depth again, even though she reveals some pretty traumatic experiences she's gone through. She's relegated as a background character with no substance or character growth of her own. The next big plot she gets is dating Drake's character, Jimmy, the only other main black character. Then she graduates, and while some of the characters we see post-graduation developing their own storylines, including Paige, who is supposedly her best friend, Hazel disappears. Hazel had a lot of potential, but the Degrassi writers paid her dust. Andrea Lewis, the actress herself, has since come out to speak about her experience on Degrassi, along with the actress who played Hazel's friend, Terry. On her personal YouTube channel, Andrea has stated, "Coming off of Degrassi, I was able to process how much I felt like I didn't have a voice, and it changed my trajectory in terms of how I spoke up. Hazel was literally treated like the black girl. She just didn't have anything going on for her other than being the black girl on the show." Andrea even said that although the writers would ask for the cast input at the beginning of every season, despite voicing her desire to have bigger storylines, they never gave her any. To add insult to injury, one year, the writers promised her bigger storylines and had a meeting to discuss the details of these storylines with her. But they never happened. The next year, when she was off the show, they gave those exact same storylines to another character. Isn't Degrassi supposed to promote intersectionality and feminism? Let's talk about Hazel's friend Terry. Terry was in the same grade as Hazel and received similar attention, except she did get a season-long plotline, one dealing with domestic abuse within a relationship. Now, this storyline was extremely important. It taught teens about the nature of abuse, not only physically, but also emotionally.
All right, is everyone ready?
Oh, I don't know, what about a burger?
Why not a salad? You said yesterday you're craving one.
Things escalated really quickly between Rick, the boy pursuing her, and Terry. At first, it seemed like an innocent crush. Rick would drop roses off at Terry's locker, and he seemed like a sweet kid, but he quickly became controlling and emotionally abusive. In their most heated fight, he pushes her onto the ground, and she hits her head on a brick. She's later hospitalized due to a coma, and then disappears from the show. The explanation the writers gave was that she transferred schools. But let's take a step back and look at this. A girl gets emotionally and physically abused to the point where she's written off of the show. Her boyfriend, Rick, stays on the show. A lot of crazy shit happens with him later, but shouldn't it have been the other way around? Up until this point, Terry had been a main character. She also promoted body positivity and inclusivity, and now this figure and role model was gone. The plot brought a lot of awareness to the issues of domestic violence, yet sent a mixed message at the same time because of her disappearance. There's not enough time to address the other topics the next generation covered, or to lay out all of its faults. Degrassi did cover many sexual assault storylines and handled them with care. They did give redemption arcs to what on the surface appeared irredeemable, stereotypical characters and allowed for empathy from the viewer. They did include a lot of sex positivity for teenagers and covered teenage pregnancy, including abortion and adoption storylines. But remember that time a gay character was gay bashed and didn't receive therapy after this traumatic experience, and a few episodes later it was forgotten about? Remember when Paige and Alex were together, but after they broke up, Paige never mentioned her or her interest in girls again, perpetuating the idea that being attracted to women doesn't really count if you're a woman? Remember when Manny was filmed explicitly without her consent, and the boy who filmed her got into no serious legal trouble? After 14 seasons, Next Gen came to an end. This is where Netflix comes in. A new platform. A chance for Degrassi redemption? The switch to Netflix once again dramatically shifted the way the show felt. The theme song was completely revamped after having been pretty consistent for 14 years. As was the style. Since Degrassi aired weekly on network television before, topics were usually discussed mainly in one episode with subplots that extended throughout the season. However, with streaming, Degrassi Next Class really capitalized on bingeability and making the season more cohesive, with seasons often feeling almost like a 10-hour film rather than a collection of episodes. Topics covered in Next Class include the Black Lives Matter movement, the Syrian refugee crisis, and a lot of focus on mental health awareness. It's a cheesy show, but what more can you expect from a Netflix teen drama? Next Class loses some of its original Degrassi flair, but hey, it's a decent show that brings up social issues. Check it out if you're into that. And there's more. There's so much more. An acid trip gone wrong, teacher-student relationships, streaking, just to name a few. Degrassi is ridiculous and doesn't always do things right. But isn't it worth something that they've tried? Why did I just decide to make a 14-minute long video on a Canadian teen dramedy? The same reason I bring it up in class nearly every time we're asked of our encounters with feminism in the media. Degrassi was some of my first exposure to all of this, and it got me thinking. It doesn't need to be in the same format as Degrassi. It doesn't need to go that far, because really, will any show ever come close to the infamy that Degrassi holds? But the fact that this singular show is the one that comes to mind proves we need more of it. And we need better versions too. Thank you all for listening to me talk about Degrassi for 15 minutes. I hope you learned something. If not, I hope you have the Degrassi theme song stuck in your head for the rest of the day.